The paw pad. I had an unlit cigarette dangling from my lips, squatting on the sidewalk in front of my shop while I groomed the fat orange tabby. The tabby, whom I'd affectionately nicknamed the Duke, was purring so hard his whole belly jiggled with every breath. "Damn, Jake, you got the magic touch," Carlos, who ran the bodega next door, called out, leaning through his doorway. "You even make cats look like they're in heaven." I cracked a smile. What can I say? These hands have been called the golden ticket of the pet world. As if to prove my point, I gave the Duke a deliberate scratch on that sensitive spot on the back of his neck. He immediately let out a deep, rumbling purr, his back leg kicking out, nearly sending him tumbling off my lap. My pet shop is called The Paw Pad. It's tucked away on a not-so-busy street corner in South Austin. The place is only about 300 square feet, but I keep it spotless. The left side is for pet supplies, the right is the grooming station, and in the back, I got a small makeshift exam room. I only have a vet tech certification, but it's more than enough to handle the minor stuff. My Teddy is ready for his summer cut. A young woman in a ridiculously short skirt pushed the door open, a coffee-colored poodle cradled in her arms. "Well, hey there, Tiffany. You're looking gorgeous today. Must have dressed up just for me," I said, setting the Duke down and dusting the cat hair off my jeans. Tiffany blushed. "Get over yourself. My boyfriend's waiting outside." I clutched my chest dramatically. "You wound me, truly." As I turned to grab my grooming tools, I heard her giggle behind my back. This was my life. Single, running a pet shop that barely broke even, and my greatest talent was sweet-talking felines and females into a state of purring submission. Of course, the latter often earned me a playful slap. But what's life without a little fun? Around 3 in the afternoon, the shop was unusually quiet. I was dozing off on the counter when the bell on the door chimed. I looked up and nearly swallowed my tongue. A woman stood in the doorway, backlit by the Texas sun, her silhouette looking like it was cut from the pages of Vogue. When she stepped inside, I got a clear look at her face, skin so pale it seemed like it had never seen daylight, eyes almost unnervingly large, and lips painted a dark blood red. She wore a simple black dress with a neckline that was perfectly calibrated, not too revealing, but just low enough to make you want to look. But the most stunning thing was the cat in her arms, a flawless ragdoll with eyes the color of sapphires. "I heard you can diagnose problems," she said, her voice as cool and crisp as a chilled glass of wine. I immediately straightened up. "Vet tech. Minor issues are my specialty. What's wrong with your cat?" "Snowball hasn't been eating for the past 2 days." She placed the cat on the grooming table. "I've taken him to 3 different animal hospitals. $2,000 later, they still can't find anything wrong." I moved closer to examine the ragdoll. His coat was immaculate, his build perfect. He was clearly a show-quality cat with a pedigree. But he was definitely lethargic, his ears drooping and his gaze unfocused. "What test did they run?" I asked, gently stroking the cat's back. "CBC, chem panel, ultrasound, x-rays." She rattled off the technical terms, but her eyes were glued to my hands, as if she expected me to harm her cat at any moment. I smiled. "Ms. Monroe, is it?" She raised an eyebrow. "How did you know?" "Says so on the tag. Snowball, beloved cat of D. Monroe." I pointed to the small silver tag on the cat's collar. "Besides, with that kind of presence, you just had to be a Monroe." The corner of her mouth twitched upward for a fraction of a second before she suppressed it. "You've got a smart mouth. Occupational hazard." I shrugged, continuing my examination. "How old is Snowball?" 2 years and 3 months. "Is he neutered?" "Of course," she said, as if I'd just insulted her. "I would never allow him to breed indiscriminately." I nodded, gently opening the cat's mouth to check his gums, then palpated his abdomen. Snowball was cooperative, only letting out a soft cry when I pressed a specific spot. "Hurt here?" I asked the cat and his owner. Diana Monroe was instantly on high alert. "What is it? A GI issue? Or—" "Easy," I cut her off. "Can you tell me what Snowball usually eats?" "Imported grain-free kibble. Occasionally some boiled chicken breast or beef that I prepare myself. And he only drinks bottled spring water." She paused, then added, "He's brushed 3 times a day, gets a professional grooming once a week, and a full checkup every month." I almost whistled. This cat had a better life than I did. "Changed his food recently?" She shook her head. Any new plants in the house? Different cleaning supplies? No, none. She was starting to get impatient. Can you figure it out or not? I gave her a mysterious smile and turned to grab a small bag of cat grass from a shelf. Try this. Diana stared at the baggie of grass, as if I'd handed her a bag of dirt. You want me to feed grass to the cat that $2,000 in tests couldn't diagnose? It's on the house, I said, shaking the bag. And it's not just any grass. Ragdolls have sensitive stomachs. Sometimes all they need is a little fiber to get things moving. Snowball isn't seriously ill. He's just a little backed up. She looked at me, then at the grass, full of doubt. You're sure? If you don't believe me, you can always go for MRI next, I said deliberately. But that's a pretty rough experience for a cat. Diana bit her lower lip. I noticed her teeth were perfectly white and straight. How do I give it to him? She finally asked. I tore open the package and pulled out a few tender green shoots. Just put them here. He'll eat it himself. Sure enough, Snowball sniffed the grass, his ears perked up, and he began to nibble at it delicately. Diana's eyes widened. He's actually eating. He hasn't touched a thing in 3 days. Cats are smarter than people, I said with a triumphant grin. They know what they need. She watched Snowball eat, and for the first time, her expression softened. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, catching her profile. It was then I noticed a tiny beauty mark near the corner of her eye, a mole that added a touch of vulnerability to her otherwise cold, stunning face. How much? Once Snowball had finished, Diana's haughty mask was back in place. Free sample, I said with a wave of my hand. If it works, you can come back and buy some next time. She narrowed her eyes. Do you try to pick up all your female customers this way? Only the ones with rag dolls. I winked, especially the ones named Monroe. Diana let out a small huff, then pulled a business card from her Hermes bag and slapped it on the counter. If Snowball isn't better by tomorrow, I'll be back to settle the score with you. I picked up the card, embossed, gold leaf lettering. It had only a name and a phone number. No company. Damn, she was rich. Ms. Monroe, I said, dropping the playful act. I'm serious. If Snowball isn't feeling better tomorrow, call me anytime. I'm on call 24/7. She stared at me for a few seconds, then suddenly reached out and cupped my chin. You're handsome, but you have a smart mouth. Before I could process what was happening, she had scooped up Snowball and turned to leave, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete floor. After the door closed behind her, I realized my heart was beating a little too fast. Holy shit, I muttered to myself, touching my chin. That woman is a firecracker. I thought it was just an interesting encounter, but at 6 o'clock the next morning, my phone rang. He threw up. Diana's voice came through the line, cold as ice. I looked at the time, still half asleep. What? Snowball. He ate your grass, and he threw up in the middle of the night. She paused. I need you to come over and look at him. Now. I sat up. Ms. Monroe, it's 6 in the morning. I've sent the address to your phone, she interrupted. You have 1 hour to get here. Otherwise, I'll make sure you can't do business in this city again. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a moment, then burst out laughing. What the hell was this? Some kind of dark romance plot. But the strange thing was I wasn't angry. I was intrigued. 40 minutes later, I was standing in front of a luxury downtown condo building. The doorman eyed me with suspicion. I couldn't blame him. I was in a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans, with my hair sticking up. Diana lived on the penthouse floor. The moment the elevator doors opened, a faint, expensive perfume hit me, the same one she wore. The door to her apartment was unlocked. I pushed it open gently. Ms. Monroe. In here, a voice called from inside. I stepped into the apartment and was nearly blinded by the view. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire Austin skyline. The decor was minimalist but screamed money. Diana was sitting on a plush sofa in a silk robe, with Snowball curled up on her lap. So he's fine after throwing up? I asked, crouching down to check the cat. Diana didn't answer my question. Instead, she asked, Are you afraid of heights? She gestured to the window. Acrophobia. I do all right, I said, confused. Snowball looks to be in good shape now. His energy is much better. Diana gently stroked the cat's head. After he threw up, he started eating again. He even played with his toys for a bit. That's good, I said, relieved. Vomiting is a normal reaction. It means he's clearing out the hairballs that have built up in his stomach. She suddenly looked up at me, her large eyes seeming especially clear in the morning light. Are you hungry? The change in topic was so abrupt it took me a second to catch up. What? I made breakfast. She pointed to the island in the open-plan kitchen, where two perfectly arranged plates were waiting. Bacon omelets and fresh squeezed orange juice. I then noticed she wasn't wearing any makeup. Without it, she looked much younger, almost like a college student. The collar of her robe was slightly open, revealing a delicate collarbone. I don't think that a good idea, I stammered, scratching my head. I'm just here for the cat. Diana smiled, a genuine, dazzling smile for the first time. Afraid I'll eat you alive? Not a chance, I said, puffing out my chest. I'm just worried about my self-control. Things could get out of hand. She stood up, and Snowball gracefully leaped to the floor. Diana walked toward me, so close I could smell the faint scent of her perfume. Jake Ryan, do you know why I chose your shop? Because I'm devastatingly handsome. Because you're the only vet who didn't try to grope my hand, she said softly, and the only one who dared to talk back to me. I swallowed hard. So about that breakfast. Eat it or don't. It's up to you, she said, turning and walking toward the dining area. But I make the best damn omelets in all of Austin. I glanced at my watch. The shop didn't open for another 2 hours. Screw it. I muttered under my breath and followed her. Diana's back was to me, but I'd bet my life she heard me, because her shoulders trembled slightly, as if she were trying to stifle a laugh. Diana's dining table was so long, I felt like she was sitting in a different zip code. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the silverware and making my eyes ache. Not used to a fork and knife? She asked, cutting into her omelet with the grace of surgeon. I picked up the chopsticks she'd thoughtfully provided. This is more my speed. We country folk aren't accustomed to your fancy city tools. A corner of her mouth lifted. A country boy wouldn't recognize a Hermes bag at 20 paces. I watch a lot of QVC, I said, stuffing a piece of omelet into my mouth. My eyes went wide. Holy hell, this was good. The smoky flavor of the bacon, the silkiness of the egg, and a layer of melted Gruyere exploded on my tongue. Diana rested her chin on her hand, watching me. So, it's all right, I said, feigning indifference while grabbing another huge bite. Edible. She let out a soft laugh, stood up, and brought another entire omelet over from the kitchen. Such a tough guy. That's when I noticed she was barefoot. Her ankles were slender. Her toenails painted the same dark red as her lipstick. The silk robe clung to her body as she moved, outlining curves that were impossible to ignore. Get an eyeful? She asked, placing the plate in front of me. Her voice was a dangerous, sweet purr. I swallowed hard. Not yet, but I'm afraid if I keep looking you're going to start charging me. Smart man, she said, returning to her seat. It's by the second. You just stared for 13 seconds. For you a discount. $13,000. I nearly choked on my orange juice. You're more high maintenance than your cat. At the mention of her cat, her expression softened instantly. She glanced toward the living room where Snowball was lounging on a cat tree that looked more expensive than all the equipment in my shop combined. He's not usually this well-behaved, Diana said. Only when he's sick. I put down my chopsticks. Ms. Monroe, can I ask you a question? Go ahead. Why are you so intense about Snowball? I chose my words carefully. Most people don't spend $2,000 on vet tests right off the bat. She was quiet for a moment, poking at her food with a fork. Because he's the only friend I have. The words were as light as a feather, but they landed on me like a ton of bricks. I was about to say something when we heard a sudden crash. Snowball had fallen from the cat tree. Diana moved with shocking speed, rushing over in an instant. I was right behind her. Snowball was on the floor, his limbs twitching slightly. What's happening to him? Diana's voice trembled, her fingers digging into my arm. I knelt to examine him. Don't panic. It's probably just a lingering effect from the grass. I gently massaged the cat's belly. I need to get some medicine for my shop. He'll be fine. I'll go, she said immediately. You stay here and watch him. You don't know where. She had already grabbed her car keys. Send me the location. Tell me exactly where it is. I sighed, pulling out my phone to send her the shop's address. Inside the door to the right. Third cabinet, green bottle. The label says GastroSooth. Diana nodded and turned to leave. I called after her, "Wait, you're going out like that?" She looked down at her silk robe and frowned. "Is there a problem?" "No, it's just—" I scratched my head. "I'm afraid a cop might pull you over for a DUI. "Why?" "Anyone who sees you driving dressed like that is going to assume you're drunk." She paused, then burst out laughing, the beauty marked by her eye dancing. "Jake Ryan, you really are." She didn't finish, already out the door. I heard the ding of the elevator, then the rapid click-clack of her heels fading away. I shook my head and turned back to Snowball. He was already doing better, trying to stand up. I lifted him onto the sofa and gently massaged his stomach. "Your owner is a real piece of work, buddy." Snowball meowed, as if in agreement. I looked around, finally getting a chance to really take in Diana's apartment. It was minimalist, but every piece of furniture screamed expensive. On the walls hung several abstract paintings. I leaned in to check the signatures and almost popped an eye out. They were all originals. There was a picture frame on the coffee table. I picked it up. It was a younger Diana, holding a tiny kitten, standing in front of what looked like a university building. Her smile was so bright and genuine she looked like a different person. The photo was dated 5 years ago. "What are you looking at?" Diana's voice came from right behind me. I jumped, nearly dropping the frame. "You back already?" I turned to see she'd changed into a tight black dress and heels. She'd even redone her makeup, transforming back into the intimidating Ice Queen. She dangled a small bottle from her fingers. I ran 3 red lights. "Impressive," I said with genuine admiration. "Give me the meds." She didn't move, her eyes fixed on the photo frame in my hands. That was Snowball's mother. Her name was Cotton Candy. I nodded, placing the frame back on the table. "That's a sweet name." "She's dead," Diana said flatly. "Car accident." Suddenly, I understood her obsession with Snowball. I took the bottle from her, went to the kitchen to find a small bowl, and crushed 2 pills into a powder, adding a little water to make a paste. "Is he going to take that?" Diana asked, following me. "Watch and learn." I walked back to the living room, knelt in front of Snowball, and dabbed a bit of the medicated paste on his nose. The cat instinctively licked it off, then started lapping up the rest from the bowl. Diana's eyes widened. "How did you do that?" "A little feline psychology," I said with a smug smile. "They hate being forced, but they'll always clean themselves if they get dirty." She watched me with a thoughtful expression. "You really understand animals." "It's how I make a living," I shrugged. "Just like you know how to put on a full face of makeup in 5 minutes. She raised an eyebrow. "You notice I put on makeup?" "Hard not to," I said, pointing to her lips. The color changed. You went from crimson to cherry red. Her eyes widened slightly, and then she leaned in close. "Jake, you're much more observant than you let on." Her perfume washed over me, and I instinctively took a step back, bumping into the coffee table. "Occupational hazard. I'm used to observing animals." "Is that so?" She took another step closer, cornering me. "Then can you observe what I want to do right now?" My Adam's apple bobbed. "Write me a ticket for speeding?" She smiled, reaching out to straighten my collar. "I'm thinking about hiring you as Snowball's private vet." "I'm expensive." I tried to joke, but my voice came out hoarse. "How expensive?" "Billed by the second." I quoted her back. "You just looked at me for 10 seconds. Want to settle up now?" Diana narrowed her eyes, then reached out and cupped my chin again. "You know, you're the first man who's ever dared to talk to me like this." "Because they were all scared off by you?" "Because they all wanted to get in my pants," she said, releasing me. "You, on the other hand, seem more interested in my cat." I burst out laughing. "You figure me out." After taking his medicine, Snowball was clearly feeling much better. He hopped onto the sofa and rubbed against Diana's hand. The way she stroked him was incredibly gentle, a stark contrast to her aggressive demeanor just moments before. "He's going to be fine," I said, getting to my feet. "I should get back to the shop. It opens at 10. Diana nodded. "I'll drive you." "No need. I could just call an Uber." I said, "I'll drive you." Her tone left no room for argument as she grabbed her keys. I sighed. "Ms. Monroe, are you just used to everyone doing exactly what you say?" "Yes," she admitted without hesitation. "Is that a problem?" "Nope," I said, raising my hands in surrender. "Lead the way, Your Majesty." She snorted softly and walked toward the elevator, holding Snowball. I followed behind, watching the gentle sway of her hips and feeling my throat go dry. Diana's car was a red Porsche, the interior all black, just like her bold and mysterious. I got into the passenger seat and noticed her initials engraved on the seatbelt buckle as I clipped it in. Custom, I asked. Birthday present, she answered curtly as she started the engine. From me to me. I smiled. I didn't say it was from someone else. She shot me a sideways glance. But you were thinking it. She wasn't wrong. I rolled down the window, letting the breeze cool my face. The Austin morning was already coming to life, with food trucks firing up their grills and people hurrying along the sidewalks. How long have you had the shop? Diana asked suddenly. 3 years, I said. I worked at a big animal hospital before that, saved up some money, and went out on my own. Why pets? I looked out the window. Because animals are simpler than people. You're good to them. They're good to you. There aren't all these hidden agendas. She was quiet for a moment. Snowball was the only kitten in Cotton Candy's litter. After she died, I almost gave him away. Why didn't you? Because one night, he crawled up on my pillow and started licking the tears from my face. Diana said, her voice very soft. That's when I realized. He understands everything. I turned to look at her, and her profile seemed incredibly soft in the morning light. In that moment, I had an overwhelming urge to reach out and touch the tiny beauty mark at the corner of her eye. The car pulled up in front of my shop. Carlos was setting out fruit crates, and his eyes went wide as saucers when he saw me get out of a Porsche. Thanks, I said, unclipping my seatbelt. If Snowball has any more trouble, just call. Diana didn't speak. She just pulled a card from her purse and handed it to me. What's this? I took it. It was a black card. For your services, she said. No pin. I laughed and tucked the card back in her bag. Save it for your next vet. My rates are very reasonable. 2 of your bacon omelets next time will cover it. She raised an eyebrow. Do you have any idea how much money is on this card? Nope. And I don't want to know, I said, opening the door. Look, I like money as much as the next guy, but I like being alive more. If I take your money, I'm afraid you'll have me whacked in my sleep. Diana suddenly laughed. Not a smirk or a cold chuckle, but a real, genuine laugh that made her eyes curve into crescents. Jake Ryan, you're a very strange man. Takes one to know one, I said, hopping out of the car and giving her a wave. Drive safe, and try not to run any more red lights. She didn't answer, just lowered the window. 7 o'clock tonight. I'll pick you up for dinner. Huh, Snowball needs a follow-up exam, she said, her expression perfectly serious. You wouldn't refuse a concerned pet owner, would you? I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, she raised the window and sped off, leaving me in a cloud of exhaust. Carlos ambled over, his face a mask of pure gossip. Dude, seriously, where did you hook up with a bombshell like that? I stared at the disappearing Porsche and shook my head. She's not a bombshell. Then what is she? She's a hurricane, I sighed, turning to unlock the door to my shop, but I couldn't stop the smile from spreading across my face. 3 at 6:50 p.m., I was standing in front of the paw pad, checking my reflection in the dark window for the 3rd time. I was wearing a dark blue button-down, black chinos, and my hair was barely tamed with a fistful of gel. Carlos, cracking sunflower seeds, leaned out of his bodega. Big date, Jake. House call, I said, straightening my collar. Rich people's cats require a certain dress code. Carlos waggled his eyebrows. The Porsche lady? I saw the way you two were looking at each other when she dropped you off this morning. Shut it, you, I said, tossing my backpack at him just as the familiar roar of an engine approached. The red Porsche executed a perfect, tire-squealing turn and stopped sharply at the curb. The window rolled down. Diana had gone for a dramatic look tonight. Sharp, winged eyeliner and dark red lipstick. She looked like a black widow heading to a feast. She scanned my outfit, a small smirk playing on her lips. Get in. I opened the door and was hit with a wave of cold, crisp perfume. She was wearing a backless black dress, and I could just make out a butterfly tattoo at the small of her back. My eyes lingered for half a second too long, earning me a sharp glare. Want to keep your eyes? She asked, stomping on the gas. The acceleration slammed me back into my seat. Ms. Monroe, this is practically attempted murder, I said, fumbling for my seatbelt. She snorted. Don't flatter yourself. The Porsche weaved through Austin traffic, the city lights blurring into streaks of color. Diana drove like she lived, aggressively, changing lanes without signaling, filling any gap she could find. I gripped the door handle, feeling like I was on a roller coaster. "So, where are we going?" I finally asked as we crossed the Congress Avenue Bridge. "Dinner," she said curtly. "Snowball needs a follow-up." I glanced at the back seat. It was empty. "Where's the cat?" "At home." She shot me a look. "What? You afraid I'm going to eat you?" I clutched my chest dramatically. "That'll cost you extra." Diana slammed on the brakes, and I nearly hit the windshield. She turned to face me, her eyes dangerously bright in the dim light. "Jake, do you flirt with all your clients like this?" "Only the ones with ragdolls," I shot back, meeting her gaze. "Especially the kind who summon their vets in the middle of the night." We stared at each other for a long moment, and then she laughed, reaching out to pinch my chin. "Interesting." Her nails were perfectly manicured, painted the same shade as her lips. They scraped lightly against my skin. I swallowed hard, catching the scent from her wrist, top notes of citrus, a heart of rose, and a base of cedarwood. Diana let go and put the car in drive again. "Let's see if you're still this cocky in a few minutes." 10 minutes later, we pulled up to a discreet, gray building with no sign. A single valet in a sharp suit stood waiting. I followed Diana through a dimly lit hallway into a private dining room. It was small, with a single table for two set with flickering candles. The walls were dark wood, the soundproofing so effective that when the door closed, it felt like we were sealed off from the rest of the world. "2 Michelin stars," Diana said as she sat. "The chef's a friend. He opened this room just for us tonight." I raised an eyebrow. "Us? Are you trying to seduce me, Ms. Monroe?" She unfolded her napkin with painstaking slowness. "Seduce you? I'd get more satisfaction from a cup of instant ramen." The waiter brought 2 glasses of champagne. Diana raised hers. "To Snowball's savior, and to my bacon omelet," I said, clinking her glass. The first course was a foie gras torchon with fig jam. I was still trying to figure out which fork to use when Diana suddenly asked, "Why is your vet tech license a fake?" My hand twitched, and my fork clattered against the plate. "Why the surprise?" she asked, taking a sip of champagne. "Did you really think I wouldn't run a background check?" "Not surprised," I said, picking up the fork again. "Just didn't expect you to lay your cards on the table this soon." Diana pulled a file from her purse and slid it across the table. I opened it. Inside was my file from 3 years ago, proof of withdrawal from the veterinary program at Texas A&M, and a photocopy of a forged vet tech certificate. "Care to explain?" she asked, steepling her fingers under her chin. I closed the file. "Dropped out because I got in a fight. Faked the certificate to open my shop. I've never harmed an animal, and you've seen my skills. Anything else?" "Why the fight?" "A classmate was abusing a cat. I put him in the hospital." I shrugged. Couldn't afford his medical bills, so I withdrew. Diana's eyes narrowed. "What happened to the cat?" "I kept him. He died of old age last year." I pulled out my phone and showed her my screensaver, a calico cat perched on my shoulder. His name was Lucky. She stared at the photo for a few seconds, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "So you'd rather break the law than give up on being a vet?" What choice did I have? I took a gulp of champagne. The big vet hospitals wouldn't touch my resume. Starting my own shop was risky, but at least I could save a few animals. The waiter brought the second course, a black truffle pasta. Diana didn't press the issue, elegantly twirling noodles onto her fork. The candlelight flickered across her face, making the beauty marked by her "I appear" and disappear. "You're not going to call the cops?" I broke the silence. "The cops." She let out a small, humorless laugh. "I know more about using fake documents than you do." She pulled a business card from her wallet and handed it to me. The gold-embossed letters glittered in the candlelight. Diana Monroe, CEO, Monroe Capital. "Well, I'll be damned," I whistled. "Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Monroe." Monroe Capital, the biggest private investment firm in Austin. They were in the news last year, something about a Forbes list. No wonder she could toss around black cards and drive a Porsche like it was a toy. "Scared now?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Terrified, I grinned. "So, is this dinner my last meal? You planning on dumping me in Lake Travis afterward?" She ignored my comment and signaled the waiter, who brought out the third course, a massive tomahawk steak, easily enough for 2. "Eat up," she said, cutting into her piece. "You'll need your strength if you're going for a swim." The steak was incredible. I devoured my portion while Diana ate with slow, deliberate grace. We made small talk, drifting from the challenges of running a small business to Austin's nightlife. Strangely, the atmosphere was relaxed, as if the earlier threat had never happened. Dessert was a chocolate lava cake. Diana gently pierced hers with a spoon, and the molten center oozed out like dark blood. "The real reason I looked into you," she said suddenly, "was because of Snowball." I looked up. "Oh, he's very important to me," Diana said, her voice softening. "After what happened to Cotton Candy, I couldn't bear to lose another one." I put down my spoon. "I get it." "No, you don't," she said, her eyes meeting mine. The candlelight danced in her pupils. "Do you know why I chose you? Because all those licensed vets just wanted to run up a bill. But you were actually looking at the cat, not the money." I was floored. I didn't know what to say. Diana slid an envelope across the table. "Your real file, including the security footage from the fight. The originals have been destroyed. This was the only copy." I opened the envelope. It was empty. "Thanks," I said, my voice dry. "Don't thank me yet," she smiled. "There are conditions." "What conditions?" "Be Snowball's private vet," she said, taking a sip of red wine. $50,000 a month. On call 24/7. I nearly choked on my own spit. 50 grand? You might as well just put me on retainer as your boy toy. "In your dreams," she scoffed. "It's just that my work requires a lot of travel, and Snowball needs someone to look after him." Just as I was about to answer, her phone rang. Diana glanced at the caller ID, and her face went pale. "Mrs. Gable, what is it?" A frantic voice crackled through the phone. Diana shot to her feet. "I'm on my way." "Snowball?" I asked. She nodded, her face as white as a sheet. "Seizures. He's foaming at the mouth." We bolted from the restaurant. The Porsche roared through the night. Diana's hands were trembling on the steering wheel, her knuckles white. "Stay calm," I said, trying to soothe her. "It could be epilepsy. It's not always fatal. He's never done this before." Diana's voice was filled with a rare, raw panic. 10 minutes later, we burst into her apartment. Snowball was lying on the living room rug, limbs rigid, foam bubbling from his mouth. A woman I assumed was Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, stood by helplessly. I dropped to my knees beside him. "How long has he been seizing?" "5 minutes." Mrs. Gable stammered. I gently held the cat, preventing him from injuring himself. "Diana, go to my shop and get the medicine. Fridge, second shelf, blue bottle. The label says AP Soothe." Diana ran, without a word, not even bothering to change out of her heels. I continued to comfort Snowball. His condition gradually stabilized, but his eyes remained unfocused. 20 minutes later, Diana returned, breathless, her hair soaked with rain, her makeup smudged. She handed me the bottle, her fingers like ice. I quickly prepared a dose and injected it. Snowball struggled for a moment, then grew still, his breathing evening out. "He's stable for now," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. "But he needs to be monitored through the night." Diana knelt on the rug, gently stroking Snowball's back, her eyes red. Rainwater dripped from the ends of her hair, creating dark spots on her black dress. "You should go change," I said. "I'll watch him." She shook her head, stubbornly staying by Snowball's side. I went to the bathroom, grabbed a towel, and handed it to her. "At least dry your hair." Diana took the towel and began to dry her hair mechanically. I noticed a series of faint, pale scars on her wrist, as if she'd been scratched. "Cotton candy?" I asked, gesturing to the scars. She paused, then nodded. "At the end." She was in a lot of pain. I didn't say anything, just sat quietly beside her. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the windows like a secret confession. "I was driving her to get spayed," Diana said suddenly. A truck ran a red light. Her voice was so quiet, it was almost lost in the sound of the rain. I moved a little closer, catching the scent of rainwater mixed with her perfume. She died instantly. I was holding her, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. Diana's fingers twisted the towel unconsciously. Later, I picked Snowball from her litter because his eyes looked the most like hers. I gently took her hand. "It wasn't your fault." "It was," she snapped, her head jerking up, her eyes blazing. "If I had taken a different route, if I hadn't been in such a hurry to get her spayed." "Diana," I interrupted, "the cat doesn't blame you." She froze, her lips trembling. A single tear escaped and traced a path past the beauty mark, landing on the back of my hand. It was scalding hot. Just then, Snowball let out a soft meow and nudged her hand. She seemed to snap back to reality, quickly wiping away her tear and composing her features back into a haughty mask. "Thank you." I grinned. "For what? I'm charging you 50 grand a month, remember?" Diana shot me a glare, but the corner of her mouth tilted up, taking advantage of the situation. Professional integrity. I shrugged. "By the way, is that private vet offer still on the table?" "Depends on your performance," she said, lifting Snowball and kissing the top of his head. "You're staying to observe him tonight." "Of course," I said, stretching. "Is there a guest room? Or am I bunking with you?" Diana gave me a cold smile. "You can sleep in the cat bed." I ended up on the living room sofa, with Snowball's little bed right next to me. I woke up in the middle of the night to find Diana curled up asleep in a nearby armchair, her hands still resting on Snowball. Moonlight filtered through a gap in the curtains, illuminating her face, her long lashes casting tiny shadows on her cheeks. I quietly got a blanket and draped it over her. As I did, she mumbled, "Jake." "Yeah, go back to sleep," I whispered. She grabbed my wrist in her sleep. "Don't go." I froze. Her fingers were cold and delicate, like the paws of a small animal. I gently squeezed back. "I won't." Diana fell back into a deep sleep, but she didn't let go of my hand. I ended up squatting by the sofa for the rest of the night like some kind of night on watch. In his bed, Snowball rolled over and let out a contented purr. I woke up twisted into a pretzel on Diana's leather sofa. My neck felt like it had been run over by a truck. Snowball had, at some point, climbed onto my chest and was now staring down at me with his sapphire blue eyes. "Morning, Your Highness," I said, scratching his head. He immediately started purring. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Carlos at the shop. "Jake, the state licensing board is here. They're asking for your veterinary license." I shot upright, sending Snowball leaping gracefully away. The licensing board? They hadn't bothered me in 3 years. Why today of all days? "You're awake." Diana's voice came from behind me. I turned to see her leaning against the kitchen island, already dressed for work in a crisp white blouse and a black pencil skirt, her hair pulled back in a flawless bun. The morning sun created a golden halo around her. She looked like a painting, except for the file folder in her hand. "Care to explain?" She tossed the folder onto the coffee table. On top was an official letterhead from the Texas Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners, announcing a formal investigation into the paw pad for suspected practice of veterinary medicine with a fraudulent license. The date on the notice was yesterday afternoon, right when Diana and I were at that Michelin-starred restaurant. "You reported me?" I asked, looking up at her. Diana took a sip of coffee, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Why would I need to report you? All it takes is a phone call." Snowball hopped onto her shoulder, looking like an expensive fur stole. The two of them stared down at me, their expressions unnervingly similar. "So this is—" I waved the letter. "A threat." "It's a transaction," she said, setting down her cup. She pulled another document from her briefcase. A private veterinarian employment contract. $50,000 a month, room and board included, on call 24/7. I flipped through the contract. It was 5 pages of dense legal jargon, including clauses that stated I had to be available at all times, could not work with any other pet clinics, and had to live in an apartment designated by her. The last clause even demanded I get rid of the picture of Lucky on my phone. "Are you serious?" I pointed to the last line. "You're jealous of a dead cat." "Professional relationships require purity," she stated, her face unreadable. I couldn't help but laugh. "Ms. Monroe, this sounds less like hiring a vet and more like taking a mistress. A mistress doesn't get paid this well." She walked towards me, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown timer. "Sign it, and the licensing board problem goes away." I stood up, towering over her by half a head. I could smell her perfume, a cool scent of cedar and spring water. This close, the beauty marked by her, I was more pronounced, like a drop of ink. "Can I ask you something?" I looked down at her. "Why me?" "Austin is crawling with licensed vets." Diana's eyelashes fluttered. "Because they're all afraid of me. And I'm not." "You are," she said, suddenly placing a hand on my chest. "But your heart isn't racing." She was right. My heartbeat was steady. It wasn't an act. I really wasn't afraid of her. In fact, I found her whole ruthless CEO persona kind of cute. How about this? I said, placing the contract back on the coffee table. I'll deal with the licensing board myself. I don't want your 50 grand a month, but if Snowball gets sick, I'm on call. I'll charge by the visit. 500 pop. Diana narrowed her eyes. Do you have any idea what the penalty for practicing without a license is? Confiscation of illegal earnings, a fine of $1 to $10,000, and in severe cases, jail time. I know, I said with a dismissive wave. But I haven't charged a medical fee in 3 years. It's all been voluntary donations. Doesn't count as illegal earnings. She froze, clearly not expecting me to be so stubborn. Snowball let out a timely meow, as if mocking her. You. Diana suddenly grabbed her coffee cup as if to throw it. As she raised her arm, her sleeve slid down, revealing several long, thin scars on the inside of her wrist. A mix of old and new, like they'd been made repeatedly with something sharp. Time seemed to stop. She hastily pulled her sleeve down, but it was too late. I grabbed her wrist, gently pushing the cuff back up. The scars were pale pink in the morning light, a twisted, secret code. Cotton candy, I asked softly. Diana snatched her hand back. It's none of your business. I sighed and pulled my acupuncture kit from my backpack. Snowball needs another treatment. His epilepsy could relapse. She eyed me warily. What are you doing? Treating my patient, I said, unrolling the kit to reveal the hair-thin silver needles. Acupuncture can be very effective for feline epilepsy. Want to give it a try? Snowball, as if understanding, hopped down from Diana's shoulder and rubbed against my leg. Her expression softened for a split second before hardening again. You know acupuncture? Learned it from an old-timer back home, I said, crouching down to stroke Snowball's back. Animals are simpler than people. They don't ask to see your license. That seemed to hit a nerve. Diana was silent for a moment before finally nodding. Do it here. I had Snowball lie on a soft cushion and began gently massaging pressure points. He was tense at first, but under my skilled hands, he slowly relaxed. This one, I said, pointing to a spot on the back of his neck, is like the human Feng Chi point. It's excellent for calming the nerves. Diana knelt beside me, watching intently. I took the opportunity to take her wrist, and before she could react, I pressed my thumb onto a pressure point on the inside. This is an Eguan point, I said softly. It helps with palpitations, insomnia, and depression. She tried to pull away, but I applied more pressure. Strangely, she stopped struggling, her brow gradually unfurrowing. How did you? Humans and animals have a lot in common, I said, releasing her. For instance, both sometimes resort to self-harm when they're under too much stress. Diana shot to her feet. I did not self-harm those. Those are from cotton candy. Cat scratches don't look like that, I said, continuing to treat Snowball. They're shallower, more erratic. The cuts on your wrist were self-inflicted, and not for the first time. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting our 3 shadows long across the floor. Snowball was purring comfortably. Diana stood at the edge of the light, her expression unreadable. When I was 10, she said suddenly, her voice as light as a feather, I had my first cat. I called her Snowball, too. My father hated cats. He said they were filthy animals. One day, I got second place on test. To punish me, he threw her off the balcony right in front of me. My hands froze for a second. Snowball sensed the change and licked my fingers. When I was 15, I got another one in secret. My father found out and sent him to a slaughterhouse. Diana's voice was eerily calm, as if she were telling someone else's story. But her fingers were twisting the hem of her skirt, her knuckles white. Cotton Candy was my cat in college. My father couldn't control me anymore, but I still failed to protect her. I finished the treatment and removed the needles. Snowball was asleep, his little belly rising and falling. Diana stood where she was, the sunlight hitting her scars, making them gleam. It's not your fault, I said softly. It is, she suddenly cried out. If I hadn't been driving her to get spayed, if I hadn't taken that road. Diana, I said, standing up to face her. A cat's life is only a decade or so. They're meant to leave us first. All you can do is treat them well while they're here. That's what matters. She stared at me, her lips trembling. I thought she was going to cry, but she just took a deep breath and turned to face the window. 7 o'clock tonight, she said, her back to me. Formal wear. I'm taking you somewhere. A date. I try to lighten the mood. A business dinner, she said, turning back. Her cool mask was in place again. Finance crowd. Much more high-end than your usual clientele. I clutched my chest dramatically. Ouch. Right in the feels. Diana snorted, but the corner of her mouth quirked up. And shave. You look like a bum. At 6:50 p.m., I was standing outside the paw pad in my only suit bought 3 years ago and now a little shiny at the cuffs. Carlos circled me, impressed. Dude, you go to a wedding? To the gallows, I said, adjusting my tie as I heard the familiar engine roar. The Porsche pulled up. Diana was in full battle armor tonight. Fiery red lipstick, diamond earrings that glittered in the twilight. She scanned my suit and frowned. Is that really the best you own? Sorry, Your Highness, I said, pulling open the door. We peasants can't all afford Armani. She didn't respond, just stomped on the gas, pinning me to my seat. We sped towards downtown, stopping in front of a gleaming skyscraper. A valet rushed to open her door. She tossed him the keys like a mob boss in a movie. The elevator went straight to the top floor. The doors opened to a wall of noise and the smell of champagne. The ballroom was blindingly opulent. Diana took my arm, whispering, "Don't say anything stupid. You can't afford to offend these people. Don't worry." I leaned in close to her ear. "Tonight, I'm just your arm candy." She pinched me, but didn't deny it. We'd barely stepped inside when a man with slick back hair approached. "Diana, and who is this?" "Jake Ryan, Snowball's private veterinarian," Diana said coolly. "A vet." The man looked me up and down like I was a strange new species of insect. "You're taking your pet care very seriously these days, Diana." Before Diana could reply, a few more people drifted over, all with the polished look of finance sharks. When they heard I was a vet, their expressions shifted to amusement. "They're letting vets into these things now." A woman in a backless dress chuckled. "Your tastes have certainly changed, Diana." Diana sipped her champagne, silent. I saw her knuckles whiten around glass. "A vet's a good thing," the slick-haired man said with false sincerity. "At least they're cleaner than U.S. finance types, right?" The woman in the backless dress giggled. "True. At least he doesn't have to screw people over for a living." I put down my glass and smiled pleasantly. "Do any of you own pets?" They looked at each other. The slick-haired man shrugged. "No time. Work's too crazy." "That's a shame," I said with a sigh. "Pets can tell you a lot about their owners. For instance, sir," I gestured to the man, "you have an excess of liver heat. The whites of your eyes are yellow. I'd recommend less late nights and less booze. And you, ma'am," I turned to the woman, "you have irregular periods, don't you? Lower back stiffness, a deficiency of both chi and blood." The ballroom went quiet for a moment. The woman's face turned beet red, and the man's went purple. "Ew, how did you know?" she stammered. "Observational diagnosis," I said modestly. "It's part of veterinary science. After all, animals can't tell you what's wrong." Diana coughed beside me, but I could tell she was hiding a laugh. "That's enough," the man exploded. "Diana, did you bring this man here just to insult us?" "Insult you?" Diana finally spoke, her voice like ice. "Did he say anything that wasn't true, Mr. Evans? Weren't you just hospitalized last week for liver problems? And Ms. Shaw, didn't you take 2 weeks of medical leave last month?" "You, Mr. Evans trembled with rage. "Don't forget you're still in the middle of negotiating financing with us." Diana set down her glass, her voice low but carrying. "Then the negotiations are over." She grabbed my hand and turned on her heel, her stilettos clicking decisively on the marble floor. I heard a commotion behind us, but I didn't look back. I was too busy watching Diana's profile. The corner of her mouth was turned up in a triumphant smirk, and the beauty marked by her eye glittered under the chandeliers. The second the elevator doors closed, we both burst out laughing. "Feel good?" I asked. Diana shot me a look. It was adequate. "So about that 50 grand a month, forget it," she said, pressing the button for the garage. "But I'll raise your per visit fee. 1,000, non-negotiable." I whistled. "Generous of you, Ms. Monroe." As we stepped out of the building, the Austin sky opened up. Diana stood under the awning, frowning at the downpour. The car's in the garage across the street. "Want to make a run for it?" I asked, looking at her heels. Before she could answer, I had shrugged off my suit jacket and held it over our heads. "Come on, Your Highness." She hesitated for a second, then ducked under the jacket. We dashed into the rain, our clothes instantly soaked. Halfway across the street, she stumbled on the wet pavement, her ankle twisting, and fell against me. I caught her, my arm wrapping around her waist. I could feel the warmth of her body through her drenched dress. "You okay?" I whispered in her ear. Diana looked up, rain streaming down her face like tears. But she was smiling, a real, genuine smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'm fine." We stood there in the rain for a moment, neither of us moving. Water droplets clung to her eyelashes. Her lipstick had washed away, revealing the natural pink of her lips. On pure impulse, I leaned down, but just as our lips were about to meet, she pushed me away. "The car's just ahead," she said, turning her face away, her voice a little unsteady. I sighed and held the jacket up again. "Let's go." The Porsche sped through the rainy night, the city lights blurring into streaks of color. Diana drove with intense focus, her wet hair plastered to her cheeks like an ink wash painting. I leaned back in my seat, feeling utterly exhausted. "Why did you really check up on me?" I broke the silence. Diana's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "Professional habit." "Bullshit," I said. "You dug deeper than a private investigator." The windshield wipers swished back and forth. After a long moment, Diana said softly, "I'm afraid of being betrayed." I turned to look at her. Her profile was fragile in the faint light of the dashboard. "An ex-boyfriend, a business partner," she said curtly. "He ran off with $30 million from the company and nearly sent me to prison." I whistled. "So you think I'm going to screw you over too?" "You already have." She glanced at me. "The fake vet license." "That's different," I smiled. "I was lying to the state board, not to you." Diana didn't say anything, but the car began to slow. We pulled over by the side of Lady Bird Lake. The rain had subsided to a drizzle, and a light mist was rising from the water. "Jake," she asked suddenly, "if you had the chance to get a real D.V.M. license, would you take it?" I stared out at the dark water. "I've thought about it, but I don't have the time or the money. The shop needs me, and with my record, even if I pass the exams, I might not get licensed." Diana was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled a business card from her purse and handed it to me. "A friend of mine runs a prep school for the veterinary board exams. I'll cover the tuition. The only condition is that you remain on call for Snowball." I took the card. The gold lettering gleamed in the dark. "Is this an investment?" "It's a transaction," she said, starting the car again. "We both get what we need." The rain stopped. The Porsche drove onto the Congress Avenue Bridge. The Austin skyline drifted past the window like a silent movie. 5. The guys from the licensing board stormed into the paw pad while I was in the middle of expressing a corgi's anal glands. Carlos rushed in first, looking panicked, followed by 3 men in uniforms. The one in the lead flashed a badge. "Texas Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners. We've received a complaint that you're practicing without a license." The corgi's owner, a woman with a tight perm, immediately snatched her dog back. "Oh my God, you're a fake vet. Is my precious baby going to be okay?" "Ma'am," I said, pulling off my gloves. "I'm the one who cured your dog's constipation last week, and his ear mites the month before that. Have I ever charged you more than $50? The uniform cut us off. "Sir, please present your veterinary license." I wiped my hands and pulled the forged certificate from under the counter. He took it, studied it, and started tapping the number into his phone. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Carlos frantically texting, undoubtedly sending an SOS to Diana. "This license number isn't in the system," the man said, looking up. "You need to come with us." Suddenly, the corgi's owner shoved her dog at her friend and planted herself in front of me, hands on her hips. "Hold on a minute, Dr. Jake might not have a fancy license, but his skills are 10 times better than that overpriced hospital down the street. My dog had a skin condition they couldn't fix for $3,000. He cured it with a $20 ointment." "Practicing without a license is illegal, ma'am," the officer said with a frown. "Then why don't you do something about the hospital's price gouging everyone?" she shot back, her voice rising. "My neighbor's cat had a cold, and they charge her $2,000. Is that legal just because they have a piece of paper?" I almost laughed. Just as the scene was about to boil over, the sharp click of heels announced a new arrival. Diana swept in, wearing a Chanel suit with her sunglasses pushed up on her head like a queen visiting the provinces. "What's going on here?" she asked, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on the lead officer. "Ms. Monroe." The officer suddenly looked flustered. "What are you?" Diana took off her sunglasses. "Dr. Ryan is my cat Snowball's primary care physician. Is there a problem?" 10 minutes later, the board agents were gone. The perm lady was asking Diana for an autograph, and Carlos was staring, dumbfounded. Diana pulled a document from her Hermes bag and slapped it on the counter. "Your new identity." I opened it. It was a copy of a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine diploma from Texas A&M University. My picture and name were printed right on it. It's real," Diana smiled. "Verifiable in the university's official registrar." I stared at the paper, my throat tight. "You hacked into the university system?" "Don't make it sound so crude," she said, adjusting her cuffs. "I just had a chat with the dean of admissions." I slammed the file shut. "Do you have any idea what the penalty is for falsifying academic records?" "Less than practicing without a license," Diana said with a raised eyebrow. "What? Are you upset that I'm helping you?" I took a deep breath, grabbed her by the wrist, and pulled her into the back exam room. Snowball, who had been napping in his bed, woke with a start and let out an annoyed meow. "Listen," I said, keeping my voice low. "I appreciate the help, but this kind of illegal maneuver—" "Illegal?" Diana scoffed. "And your fake certificate was legal." "That's different." I gritted my teeth. "I just didn't finish my degree. I haven't hurt anyone. You're planting a fake file in a major university system. If you get caught—" "I won't get caught," she interrupted. "The system is updated. Next week you'll sit for a make-up final exam, and your transcript will show you graduated 4 years ago." I stared at her. "You even got the exam questions?" Diana didn't answer. She pulled another folder from her bag. "Practice questions for the board exam. 80% overlap." The small room fell silent. Snowball's ears swiveled, his gaze shifting between us. The blinds chopped the afternoon sun into stripes across Diana's face, the beauty mark flickering in and out of view. "What?" I finally asked. She turned to stroke Snowball, her back to me. "I told you. Snowball needs you. Just for that." "What else would it be for?" She shot back, her eyes sharp. "Did you think this was about you?" I stepped closer and put my hands on her shoulders. "Diana, are you out of your goddamn mind? Risking all this for a cat?" "Let go." She struggled, and her sleeve slid down, revealing fresh, red marks on her wrist, looking like they'd been made last night. I dropped my hands, my eyes fixed on the marks. "You're doing it again?" Diana frantically pulled her sleeve down. "It's none of your business." "Did Snowball have another seizure?" "No." "Then why?" "Because I dreamed about cotton candy," she yelled, her voice exploding in the small space. She was covered in blood, asking me why I couldn't protect her or Snowball. Snowball darted into the deepest corner of his carrier. I stood frozen, a heavy weight settling in my chest. Diana's breathing was ragged, her eyes red, the perfect line of her eyeliner starting to bleed. "Sit," I said, pushing the exam stool towards her and grabbing my acupuncture kit. She eyed me warily. "What are you doing?" "Naguan point, remember?" I gestured to her wrist. "It helps with anxiety." Diana hesitated, then slowly sat down. I took out the thinnest needle and sterilized the inside of her wrist. Her skin was cold, her pulse racing. "Deep breaths," I said, inserting the needle as gently as I could. "What did you dream about?" She flinched as the needle went in. Cotton candy was lying in the road. I tried to pick her up, but she just fell apart. I rotated the needle, finding the right spot. And then Snowball. He was bleeding too. I kept pressing on his chest, but the blood wouldn't stop. Her voice grew quieter, just like that day. I added another needle at her Higa point. "When your father hurt your animals, did you ever try to stop him?" Diana's head snapped up. "How did you know?" "A guess," I said calmly. "You're too familiar with the wounds on your wrist. It's not your first time." She was silent for a long time. I could hear customers coming and going in the front, Carlos's booming voice greeting them. "When I was 12, Diana said suddenly, "I had a pet hamster. When my father found it, he threw it in the washing machine." My hand trembled, and I almost missed the point. I kept hitting the stop button, but it was too late. Her nails dug into her palms. "He locked me in the laundry room afterward." made me listen to the sound all night. The needle in her wrist vibrated slightly. I steadied my breath and added a third needle at her shinmin point. Her eyelashes were cast down, creating tiny shadows on her face. So, Snowball. So, I have to protect him, she said, looking up, her gaze defiant. Just like you have to accept my help. I removed the needles and handed her a glass of water. Those are two different things. I don't need you to break the law for me. Can you eat your pride? Diana scoffed. Without this diploma, you don't even qualify to take the makeup exam. Then I'd rather go back to school for 4 years. Jake, she shot up, knocking over the glass. Do you have any idea how many people beg me for help, and I don't give them the time of day? I bent down to pick up the broken glass. I'm honored, Ms. Monroe, but I can't accept. Diana snatched the cup from my hand and threw it against the wall. Ceramic shards flew everywhere. Snowball hissed, his fur standing on end. What give you the right? She trembled. The right to keep refusing me. I looked her straight in the eye. Because I don't want to be another one of your pets. The words hung in the air. Diana froze, her lips trembling. Outside, it began to rain, the drops hitting the window in a staccato rhythm that quickly became a downpour. Get out, she finally said. I picked up the terrified Snowball and left the exam room. Carlos and a few customers stared at me, having clearly heard the commotion. Jake, Carlos started. I held up a hand and put Snowball in his carrier. I need some air. Watch the shop. The rain was coming down hard. I didn't have an umbrella, so I huddled under the awning of the convenience store next door, holding the cat carrier. Snowball was moving restlessly inside. I unzipped it a little to give him some air, and he immediately poked his head out and nuzzled my hand. Miss your mom. I scratched his chin. She's on the warpath right now. Better to let her cool off. Snowball meowed, his blue eyes looking watery. I thought about the dream Diana described, and my chest tightened. I pulled out my phone and saw a dozen missed calls, all from her. I was about to call back when a text popped up. I'm at your shop. Come back. Now. D. I sighed, zipped Snowball back in his carrier, and ran back to the paw pad through the rain. I pushed open the door. The shop was empty. Carlos was gone. Only Diana stood at the counter, holding my fake license. Where's Carlos? I asked. I sent him home, she said, looking up. She'd fixed her makeup, but her eyes were still red-rimmed. We need to talk. I put the carrier on the table. Snowball eagerly scrambled out and ran to rub against her hand. She stroked him gently, as if he were made of glass. I looked into it, she began. You have 32 credits left. You can apply for academic reinstatement and take makeup exams. The dean is a college classmate of mine. I can help you do it by the book. I raised an eyebrow. No more fake diploma. Diana pursed her lips. You were right. That was too risky. The rain suddenly intensified. A flash of lightning was followed by a deafening clap of thunder. Snowball, terrified, tried to burrow into Diana's jacket. She instinctively hugged him close, her eyes on the window. It's turning into a real storm, I said. Yes. She looked down, stroking Snowball. I'll have my driver take you home. You don't have to. It's not for you. Diana cut me off. Snowball can't get wet. I grinned. All right. I'll ride on His Highness's coattails. She shot me a glare but pulled out a new contract from her bag. As you said, paper visit. But it's $1,000 per call. Non-negotiable. I took the contract and looked it over. It was much more reasonable than the last one. No residency requirement, no exclusivity clause, and it even allowed me to keep my shop. Deal. I signed it. But $500 is plenty. $1,000, Diana insisted. That includes your fee and a retainer for your silence. Silence about what? She pointed to my old fake license. This. It's enough leverage to keep you on my leash for a lifetime. I clutched my chest. The cruelty. You're a black widow. Thunder cracked again, so loud the windows rattled. Snowball yelped and tried to crawl inside Diana's silk blouse, his claws snagging the delicate fabric. Snowball, she cried out, but she couldn't bring herself to pull him away. I stepped forward to help. My fingers brushed against her collarbone. It was warm. Diana looked up suddenly. We were so close I could smell her breath, mint from mouthwash, and mine, cheap cigarette from the convenience store. Time stood still for a second. Snowball took the opportunity to leap onto the counter, knocking over a pen holder. The clatter made us both jump back. I pretended to straighten a shelf while she smoothed the wrinkles in her blouse. The car is here, she said, scooping up Snowball and heading for the door. Follow up for Snowball next week. Don't be late. Wait. I pulled a new, folded umbrella from under the counter. Here. It's brand new. Diana hesitated for a moment, then took it. Thanks. I watched her walk out into the storm. The black umbrella bloomed in the rain like a dark flower. The headlights of the Porsche flared to life and then disappeared into the downpour. I turned back into the shop and saw she had left the fake diploma file on the counter. I picked it up to put it away and noticed a small, handwritten note on the back. Jake Ryan, reinstatement exam schedule, July 28th to 30th, Building 3, Room 402. Proctor, Prof. Evans, handled. I shook my head and locked the file in a drawer. At 3:17 a.m., the phone shattered the silence of the night. I fumbled for it. Diana's voice, laced with a rare tremor, came through the line. Snowball's having another seizure. It's just like it was with Cotton Candy before she. I was wide awake in an instant, grabbing my glasses. How long? 7 minutes. The sound of a torrential downpour hammered against glass in the background. I'm on my way. Lightning tore across the sky. It was one of those violent Austin summer storms. I threw on clothes and raced downstairs. The moment I rolled up the security gate of the Paw Pad, a pair of headlights sliced through the rain. The red Porsche skidded to a stop, and Diana jumped out, holding the cat carrier. She wasn't carrying an umbrella. She was soaked to the bone. Temperature? I asked, grabbing the carrier and running for the back room. 106. 2, she said, stumbling after me, her heels slipping on the tile. I checked it 3 times. On the exam table, Snowball was a rigid ball of fur, his blue eyes unfocused, his limbs spasming. I pried open his mouth to check his tongue and caught a faint scent of bitter almonds, exactly as Diana had described Cotton Candy's final moments. Poison. Diana's nails dug into my arm. More like an anaphylactic shock, I said, rummaging through my medical kit. Did you feed him anything new? She shook her head, wet hair plastered to her pale face. The same as always. Imported canned food. Snowball suddenly convulsed violently, vomiting a yellowish-green substance. Diana screamed and lunged forward, but I held her back. Don't touch it, it could be toxic. That was the wrong thing to say. She shoved me aside, scooped up Snowball, and made a break for the door. I'm taking him to the emergency hospital. Now. Stop. I grabbed her wrist. It's a hurricane out there. The nearest 24-hour hospital is 40 minutes away. It's better than this unlicensed clinic, she screamed, her eyes wild. The last time with Cotton Candy, I'm not your father, I yelled. The roar of the storm filled the sudden silence. Diana froze. In her arms, Snowball let out a weak meow. I took a deep breath and gently pried her fingers from the cat. Give me 15 minutes. She finally relented, stumbling back to a chair like a puppet with its strings cut. I quickly administered an anti-allergy shot and set up an 4-drip of saline. As the needle went into the cat's leg, Diana turned her head away. The old scars on her wrist glowed faintly under the fluorescent light. Is he going to die? She whispered. I adjusted the drip rate. He's stable for now. I leaned over the vomit and sniffed it. Did you get a new perfume recently? Diana looked stunned. Yesterday, a new one from Hermes. Snowball is allergic to something in it, I said, pointing to the undigested food. The perfume residue on your clothes triggered an allergic seizure. Her eyes widened. But Cotton Candy. Cotton Candy was in a car accident, I said gently. The symptoms were just similar. Diana suddenly shot up, staggered to the sink, and started dry heaving. When I handed her a towel, I saw the back of her neck. Her skin was so pale I could see the blue veins, her vertebrae like a string of tiny pearls. How long has it been since you slept? I asked. She twisted the faucet, splashing water on her face. 3 days. There's a merger. I noticed a corner of a file sticking out of her purse, the Monroe Capital logo above dense columns of financial data. On the table, Snowball whimpered. Diana instantly rushed to his side, moving with a gust of wind. He needs to rest, I said, stepping in front of her. And so do you. She looked up at me, water droplets still clinging to her eyelashes. You'll stay with him. Professional service. $500 an hour. I grinned. VIP rate. Diana's mouth twitched. She looked like she wanted to curse me out, but held it in. She silently pulled a chair next to the exam table and took off her heels. That's when I saw her right ankle. It was swollen to the size of a softball. You sprained that, running down the stairs, she said, kicking the shoe away dismissively. Do you have an ice pack? I found one in the mini fridge and knelt down. She flinched when I took her ankle. Her skin was cold, the joint clearly out of place, the swelling and nasty shade of purple. Torn ligament, I said with a frown. This needs to be wrapped. She tried to pull her foot back. Worry about Snowball first. Don't move, I said, firmly holding her leg and expertly wrapping it with a compression bandage. A cat has 9 lives. You only have 1. Diana fell silent. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the only sounds were Snowball's soft breathing and the dripping of the melting ice pack. When I finished and looked up, she was staring at me, her expression complex, as if she were seeing me clearly for the first time. Jake, she asked softly, why did you become a vet? I snipped the end of the bandage. Because animals don't lie. She stroked Snowball thoughtfully. My father used to say that pets and poor people exist for one reason, to please their masters. Is that why you buy him Hermes collars? I half joked. It's why I never named them myself, Diana said, and my hands froze. My secretary named Cotton Candy. An ex-boyfriend named Snowball. Once you give something a name, you get attached. And attachment is a weakness, I finished for her. We looked at each other in silence. The rain finally started to ease. Snowball twitched in his sleep, his paw catching on Diana's sleeve. She untangled it with an impossibly gentle touch. Are you free tomorrow night? She asked suddenly. Another follow-up. A charity gala for the finance sector, she said, pulling a gold-embossed invitation from her purse. +1 required. I whistled. You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend? You'll be pretending to be the vet I employ, she scoffed. The host is a major dog breeder. He's requiring guests to bring industry experts. I held the invitation up to the light. Diana, this says plus spouse or business partner. So should I rent a tux or a wedding dress? Diana threw the ice pack at me. I caught it laughing. The noise woke Snowball, who let out an annoyed meow. We both reached to soothe him at the same time. Our fingertips brushed on his soft belly, and we both recoiled as if shocked. 7 o'clock. The Wyndham, she said, standing up, her regal composure restored. Be late, and I'll kill you. I watched her walk away, her dress soaked, her ankle bandaged, but she still moved like a queen. The next evening, I was standing outside the hotel in a rented tuxedo. When Diana stepped out of a Bentley, I almost didn't recognize her. She wore a dark red mermaid gown and a diamond necklace, her hair in an intricate updo that completely concealed her signature beauty mark. Your tie is crooked. She reached out to fix it. Her perfume reminded me of last night's emergency. I took the chance to glance at her ankle. How's the injury? Cortisone shot, she said dismissively, taking my arm. Remember, tonight you are Dr. Jake Ryan D.V.M. from Texas A&M, my highly paid animal wellness consultant. Understood, Ms. Monroe. The ballroom was a sea of glitter and champagne. We had just walked in when the same slick-haired man from the other night approached. Diana, is this the veterinary expert you mentioned? Dr. Ryan, Diana smiled. This is Xavier Vance from Omnicorp. Vance looked me up and down. In which hospital are you with, doctor? I run a small private clinic, I said with a polite smile. Oh, a little pet shop, he said, his smile dripping with pity. You're too kind, Diana, giving the little guy a break. Diana squeezed my arm, a silent command to behave. But Vance doubled down, calling over his friends. Everyone, this is Diana's little pet shop boy. If you have any questions about your fluffy friends, now's your chance. A few titters went through the crowd. I was about to speak when a woman in a backless dress walked over, a white poodle on a leash. Dr. Ryan, my sweetie has been scratching her ears constantly. Could you take a look? I knelt and checked the dog's ears, which were full of a brown, waxy substance. Fungal infection, you'll need. Impossible, the woman shrieked. Sweetie is a champion show dog. Her monthly grooming costs $2,000. It's an allergic reaction to the powder your groomer is using, I said, pointing to the dog's paws. You can see the pink residue between her toes. Vance roared with laughter. Lucy, I thought you said that groomer was the best in the state. Lucy's face turned crimson. Diana spoke up. Dr. Ryan was recently published in Veterinary Dermatology. You should look it up, Xavier. I nearly choked. I just read that journal last week. Vance's face froze, and he slunk away. Diana leaned in close. Veterinary Dermatology, latest issue, page 73. You even researched that. One must be thorough when investigating the competition, she said, sipping her champagne. I also read your ex-girlfriend Sarah's thesis. It was mediocre. I was dumbstruck. She was my lab partner in college. The reunion hookup rate is 67%, Diana said coolly. By the way, she got divorced last year. Before I could retort, a stir went through the room. A man in a bespoke suit entered, a large German shepherd at his side. The crowd parted for him. Mr. Sterling. Vance scurried over. You brought Aries. Diana leaned in. Richard Sterling, private equity king. That shepherd is a retired K-9 unit. He paid $3 million for him at auction. I narrowed my eyes, watching the dog walk. His gait was off, his back legs dragging slightly. He has hip dysplasia. No way, Diana whispered, her eyes wide. He's a purebred German champion. The result of excessive inbreeding, I said, gesturing to the dog's hindquarters. Watch the angle when he tries to sit. Sterling's gaze suddenly fell on us. And you are? Dr. Ryan, an expert in animal medicine, Diana said smoothly. He believes Aries may have a hip condition. Sterling's face darkened. Nonsense, he's SV certified in Germany. I shrugged. An x-ray doesn't lie. The ballroom was silent. Sterling stared at me, then waved his assistant over. Give me the report from Aries's last physical. The report was delivered on a tablet. Sterling scrolled to the last page. Diagnosis, mild canine hip dysplasia. He snapped the cover shut, his face a thundercloud. Dr. Ryan, where did you say you work? The Paw Pad, I said calmly. Little corner shop in South Austin. The sign's a bit faded. Sterling suddenly burst out laughing, clapping me on the shoulder. Diana, you found a real gem. He turned to the crowd. Everyone, from now on, you take your pets to the Paw Pad. The mood of the evening shifted on a dime. I was swarmed, business cards pressed into my hand. On the edge of the crowd, Diana stood holding her champagne glass, a subtle, triumphant smile on her lips. In the car on the way back, Diana was quiet. We were in the I-35 tunnel when she finally spoke. How did you know? About the German shepherd? Just comes with the job. No, she said, turning to look at me. Vance's Tibetan Mastiff has separation anxiety. Lucy's poodle is allergic to grooming products. Sterling's shepherd has hip dysplasia. You didn't even touch them. I rolled down the window, letting the night air clear my head. Animals communicate through micro-expressions and body language. The same way you read me? She asked. The tunnel lights washed over her face, and the concealer over her beauty mark seemed to fade, making it faintly visible. I looked away. You're a lot harder to read than any animal. Diana laughed softly and opened the glove compartment, pulling out a file. Take a look. I opened it. It was a lease agreement for a high-end condo in a downtown skyscraper. Rent is $2,800 a month. I'm covering it, she said, her eyes on the road. It's close to your shop and to Snowball. I closed the file. And the catch. You're on call 24/7, she said, glancing at me. Don't worry, there's a separate entrance. I thought for a moment. Utilities included? Diana rolled her eyes. And 3 meals a day. You want me to hire a maid, too? That won't be necessary, I said, leaning in with a grin. But maybe the landlady could stop by and cook dinner once in a while. Get out, she said, pushing my face away, but she didn't say no. The car stopped in front of the Paw Pad. As I got out, she called, wait. She retrieved a garment bag from the back seat. Change into this. I opened it. Inside was a brand new Armani suit. The rental was hideous, she said with a disgusted frown. Wear this to the next gala. I shook out the jacket and saw the initials J.R. embroidered on the inside lining. Custom. The tailor messed up the measurements. It's non-refundable, she explained quickly. Don't get any ideas. I grinned. A custom suit with my name on it, Ms. Monroe. Could it be? Get out of my car. She hit the button to pop the door open. Be at the apartment at 10 tomorrow to sign the lease. I stood on the sidewalk, holding the suit, and watched the red Bentley roar away. My phone vibrated. A text from Diana. Snowball has a follow-up tomorrow. Bring your acupuncture kit. I texted back. That's going to cost you extra. She replied instantly. I'll take it out of your utility bill. I smiled and put my phone away. The night breeze rustled the Armani garment bag. The price tag, still attached, flapped against my hand. The 5-figure number glinted in the moonlight. I found the first camera inside one of the carved roses on the bathroom mirror frame. It was a pinhole lens, expertly disguised as a decorative detail. If I hadn't been fixing the bathroom cabinet that Snowball had scratched, I never would have removed the frame and found it. A hair-thin fiber optic cable ran from the back of it, disappearing into a crack in the wall. I stared at the tiny black dot, the hair on my neck standing on end. The screwdriver was still in my hand, its handle slick with sweat. Well, now, this is interesting. I grinned at the lens, then smashed the screwdriver into the mirror. The sound of shattering glass was almost perfectly synchronized with the chiming of the doorbell. I crunched across the shards and opened the door. Diana stood there in a Chanel suit, holding an Hermes lunch tote, her expression freezing as she saw the screwdriver in my hand. Dropping by unannounced on my lunch break? I twirled the screwdriver. Miss me that much, Ms. Monroe? Her eyes darted to the wreckage behind me, her mouth twitching. Remodeling? Debugging, I said, stepping aside to reveal the device on the wall. This apartment has great amenities. Even get an audience when I'm taking a dump. Diana's eyelashes fluttered, but her face quickly settled into a calm mask. She set down the tote, her heels making a sickening, crunching sound on the broken glass. They're in every room, 2 in the bathroom. I almost bit my tongue. You've got to be F. It's for Snowball. She pulled a tablet from her purse and brought up a grid of camera feeds. He was vomiting last week in the middle of the night. By the time I realized, he was already dehydrated. The screen showed the cat moving through various rooms, with overlays for time, temperature, and other vitals. I noticed several camera angles were pointed directly at the bed and sofa, not the cat tree. How thoughtful, I said, pointing to a feed showing me asleep in bed. You even monitor your vet's sleeping positions? Diana was silent for a moment. Then she undid the 3rd button of her blouse and pulled out a silver chain. The pendant was a micro USB drive. This contains 15 years of surveillance footage my father kept on me. Bedroom, bathroom, even. She trailed off, her hand unconsciously drifting to the small of her back. Sunlight, fractured by the broken mirror, cast shattered patterns on her collarbone. I suddenly remembered the scars on her wrist, and my throat felt tight. And you think this is normal? I asked softly. It's not normal, she said calmly, but it's effective. We stared at each other across the sea of broken glass. Snowball padded out from his bed, carefully navigating the shards to rub against Diana's leg. She bent down and scooped him up, her movements as delicate as if she were handling porcelain. Leave them or rip them out. Your choice, she said, turning to leave. Lunch is foie gras and truffle risotto. Eat it while it's hot. After the door clicked shut, I crouched down and began picking up the pieces of glass. Snowball came over and sniffed my fingers, his blue eyes reflecting 1,000 fragmented versions of me. I thought about her 15 years of surveillance footage, and my stomach churned. That evening, during Snowball's routine checkup, the tablet screeched with an alarm. The monitor showed the cat convulsing in the living room, his temperature spiking to 104 F. I bolted out of the room to find Snowball perfectly fine, licking his paws on the cat tree. Diana's video call request was already flashing on the screen. You faked the data? I demanded as soon as I answered. Her image was clear. She was in a boardroom, a projection of Monroe Capital Q3 financials behind her. She held up a hand to silence the executives in the room and walked to a corner. Testing your response time, she whispered, 2 minutes and 17 seconds. I nearly crushed the tablet. You're using Snowball for your sick games. His right front paw was trembling slightly. The monitor caught it, she said, zooming in on the footage for me to see. A pre-seizure symptom. You taught me that. I studied the playback. She was right. There was a nearly imperceptible tremor in his paw. I had to admit, her system was more precise than my own eyes. I have a business trip tonight, Diana said suddenly. Bring Snowball to the office. Why? He needs 24-hour monitoring. She paused. You should come too. I was about to refuse when a notification popped up on the tablet. It was from the Texas Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners. The Paw Pad Clinic is scheduled for a surprise inspection tomorrow at 9 a.m. for suspected unlicensed practice. The sender was an unknown number, but the tone was chillingly familiar. You arranged this? I narrow my eyes. A small smirk played on Diana's lips. I have a solution. Be here at 8 tonight and bring Snowball. Before she ended the call, I saw the man sitting across the conference table from her, Xavier Vance. He was staring at her back with a predatory look in his eyes. At 7:50 p.m., I stood in front of the Monroe Capitol Tower, holding Snowball's carrier. The glass facade reflected my wrinkled plaid shirt and jeans, making me look like a vagrant who'd wandered onto a movie set. The receptionist saw the cat carrier and started to object, but a glance at my visitor's pass made her swallow her words. The elevator shot straight to the top floor. The doors opened to the sound of Diana's furious voice. This data is a mess. What do I even pay you people for? The boardroom was silent, a dozen suits staring at the table. Diana's back was to the door, her black suit dress accentuating a razor-sharp waist. She was clutching a document so tightly her knuckles were white. Snowball let out a meow from his carrier, and she spun around, the anger in her eyes still blazing. "Get out," she said to her team, her voice frigid. They fled as if granted a pardon, casting curious glances at me as they passed. The last one out gently closed the door. Diana collapsed into her chair, pressing her fingers to her temples. "Lock it." I locked the door and let Snowball out. He hopped on her massive desk and rubbed against her elbow. She ignored him, instead sliding a thick file toward me. "Memorize this by 9 a.m. tomorrow." I opened it. It was a complete academic file from Texas A&M's College of Veterinary Medicine. My photo was there, but the name was Jake Sterling, with an enrollment date from 4 years ago. The file was meticulously detailed, with class schedules, transcripts, even cafeteria spending records. The university's online system has already been updated," she said, pulling up the registrar's website on her monitor. "When the board inspector looks you up tomorrow, you'll be Jake Sterling, a student who took a 2-year leave of absence for family reasons and just re-enrolled this semester." I scrolled through the page. Even the leave of absence request and re-enrollment approval forms were there, complete with forged signatures. The masterpiece was a photoshopped group picture of me in a cap and gown, standing among other graduates, blurry but unmistakably me. "Your hacker is good," I whistled. Diana smirked. "Not as good as your forger." Snowball suddenly jumped off the desk and squeezed into a cabinet below it. I bent down to get him and saw a piece of paper stuck in a cabinet door. I pulled it out. It was a legal document marked confidential, an official investigation order into Monroe Capitol for suspected manipulation of public company data. "Don't look at that." Diana lunged for it, her heel catching on the carpet. As I caught her, Snowball emerged from the cabinet with a small pill bottle in his mouth. Paxil and antidepressant. The three of us were frozen in a bizarre tableau. Me holding Diana by the waist, her hand gripping my wrist, and Snowball at our feet with the bottle dangling from his mouth. Diana moved first, snatching the bottle and shoving it into her suit pocket. "Care to explain?" I asked, nodding at the document. She straightened her collar, her voice returning to its usual cool tone. "It's a hostile takeover attempt. Xavier Vance is behind it." "Vance? He wants control of Monroe Capitol," she said, then yanked open the collar of her shirt to reveal a jagged scar just below her collarbone. "This is from a negotiation with some of his thugs last year." I stared at the scar, and suddenly her obsession with surveillance made a terrible kind of sense. Snowball meowed softly, rubbing against my ankle as if to remind me of something. "So the fake degree you made for me," I said slowly, "you used the same data tampering techniques that are being investigated." Diana's expression hardened. Outside, the lights of Austin glittered against the deep night sky. We were on an island 200 meters in the air, standing on ice that could crack at any moment. "A relationship based on mutually assured destruction is the most stable kind," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "Now you're my accomplice." I was about to argue when Snowball suddenly convulsed and collapsed. Diana's face went white as she scrambled to his side. "Tim." I grabbed the tablet to check the feed, 104. 5 and rising. Diana's hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold the cat. "It's like like cotton candy at the end. I pulled out my acupuncture kit and swept the files off her desk. Lay him flat. Snowball was already foaming at the mouth, his limbs rigid. I took out the thinnest needles and quickly inserted them at points on his ears, nose, and tail. Diana watched my every move, her nails digging into her own palms. "Press here," I said, grabbing her hand and guiding it to a pressure point on Snowball's neck. Firm, but not too hard. Her fingers were ice cold, but surprisingly steady. Our heads were close together, our breaths mingling over the tiny, fragile body. The silver needles trembled with the cat's shallow breathing, creating a strange resonance between them. "You need this too," I said suddenly. Diana looked at me, confused. "What?" I took another needle and, before she could react, inserted it into the Higu point in the web of her hand. "For your anxiety." She tried to pull away, but the needle was already in, and the sharp, aching sensation made her hiss. But then, miraculously, the trembling in her hand stopped. Her breathing evened out. "In Chinese medicine, there's a concept of shared energy," I said, rotating the needle. "You and Snowball have been together so long. Your biological rhythms are synchronized. When he gets sick, your anxiety spikes, which in turn affects him." Diana stared at me, the walls of her defense finally crumbling. In the bright office light, her pupils were slightly dilated, and the beauty mark on her pale face stood out in stark relief. "So," she asked softly, "my sickness is making him sick?" "It works both ways," I said, gently touching the old scars on her wrist. "Your wounds. He's helping you heal them, too." The needles in Snowball's fur vibrated rhythmically. Diana looked down, and a single tear fell onto the cat's fur, leaving a dark, wet spot. At 3 a.m., Snowball's temperature was finally back to normal. Diana sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, holding him, the Austin skyline a river of stars behind her. As I packed my kit, I saw that she had put the fake university file back in my bag. "About the licensing board." She set her back still to me. "I'll handle it," I said, zipping up my backpack. "What's real is real. What's fake is fake." Her shoulders tensed. "You'll lose your shop." "But I'll keep my conscience," I said, walking to stand beside her at the window. "By the way, I put the camera back in the bathroom." Diana turned, surprised. I grinned, but I adjusted the angle. Now it's pointed directly at the toilet, perfect for streaming your favorite show, Planet Earth. She stared at me for 2 full seconds, and then she laughed. It was a real, dazzling laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes. In her arms, Snowball stretched, his blue eyes gleaming in the dark.